Can everybody hear me? Is Destiny here?
I'm right here.
Okay.
All right. Well, looks like there's quite a few people still in the room. So I guess we can get started with the introduction. Thank you everybody for being here. My name is Destiny and I'll be presenting today with my coworker DV. We'll get more introductions in a second. First, I just wanted to go over a few things. Just wanted to welcome everybody to the fourth day of our 16th annual Women's Policy Leadership Institute. One moment, DB, I think you might need to mute me for just a second.
Okay.
Okay, and yeah, today we're going to do a class on how to, or skills lab, sorry, on how to tell your story specifically through independent journalism, though you'll find out that might have more of a broad range than you might think. The Women's Policy Leadership Institute is a program of Montana Women Vote, and Montana Women Vote works statewide to engage low-income and Indigenous women and families, LGBTQ folks, Two-Spirit and non-binary folks, Black, Indigenous, and other Montanans of color in the democratic process as informed voters, policy advocates, and community leaders. We hope that everything we show you today will inform your efforts in your community, and we look forward to staying connected with you. We hope to work together to advance state policy that works for low-income folks in Montana. And before we get started, I'd like to go over a few technical things. So today we're in a meeting, which means you will be able to unmute yourself, though we ask that you hold off on that until the end when we have time to hear some examples and questions from the attendees. And in order to do that, you will unmute yourself by using the microphone icon in the bottom left corner of your Zoom screen. If you're joining on the phone, not sure if I see anybody on the phone, but if you are on the phone, you would unmute yourself by pressing *6. Yeah, and we also love to see people share their feedback and questions in the chat. So you'll find that at the bottom of your screen along with a Q&A box in case you want to put separate questions there. You can also just put them in the chat. If you need them or want them, we have the option for live closed captions. You'll find that in the CC button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you are having any questions or technical difficulties, you can put them in the chat, or you can call our staff at 406-317-1505. And I believe somebody will be pasting that in the chat for you, just in case somebody needs it. Today we'll be recording the session and streaming to Facebook Live. So if you missed something, you can check it out on our website later. We hope to have that up as soon as possible, just in case there's something you want to go back and review. And we ask at the end of the session that you take the time to fill out an evaluation form. If you do that, there's a spot where you can enter your name, and then you'll be eligible to win in a raffle. You could win a Visa gift card or a signed copy of What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat by our keynote speaker, Aubrey Gordon. And she is a great speaker and author, and that's a really great prize. So make sure to fill out the evaluation form. And all right, my name is Destiny Vale. I'm a community organizer here at Montana Women Vote, and I go by she, her pronouns. I'll let DB introduce herself, and then we can get into our class.
Sorry, Devi, but we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay, I will start over. Sorry about that. My name is Dee Dee Cole. I'm a community organizer for Montana Women Vote, and I'm also considered a storyteller. And I am so proud to be a storyteller because I grew up really quiet and everybody thought I was shy, but I was just afraid of having a voice or sounding uneducated. And from working with like wonderful people or being asked to volunteer with wonderful people, it has shown me that I do have a voice and my voice matters, and I can truly make a change with my experiences. And I want all of you to, realize that, your experiences, mean things too. And we should really be sharing our experiences because, they're powerful and stories are powerful, and they humanize the policies that govern our quality of life in the United States. Sharing one's stories and experiences can, bring a heartwarming, person to a situation when some people don't really, kind of get the gist of that. And so just sharing your story is just so powerful. And I like share my story anywhere and everywhere I can. And I'm going to try to put my life into a little, condensed version just to show you like all the different areas that I'm able to speak and share my experiences on. And it's really kind of cool, like growing up being so shy, but now having a voice and not ever shutting up, because I want to inform everybody on things and make sure everybody knows that their voice matters. I'm Assiniboine in Little Shell, and I'm from Fort Belknap, and I moved to Missoula in the first grade. And from moving from, such a small place to here, I was treated a little different. I was put in special ed because of the way I talked. I had, a reservation accent, I guess you would say. And that really stuck with me growing up, because, other kids would pick up on, the teachers, how they would talk to me, like, saying that's not how you pronounce things. That's not how, making me feel bad for the way I spoke. And like, I always thought if I was from the South, I wouldn't have been put in special ed. Like, I wouldn't have been made to feel ashamed for being myself. And growing up, like, I was just so quiet. And now I have a voice and I get to help, programs teach or inform teachers that, hey, what you say really does impact a person and it stays with them. And I'm so proud that I can, help other children the way, I wished somebody would have, stuck up for me and said, you're okay just the way you are, so now I get to, share that experiences with teachers and hopefully let them understand that, it makes an impact on a child, and that child becomes an adult. And other areas I share my stories in is with Planned Parenthood. I was a national storyteller for Planned Parenthood. The way I got into being a storyteller is I shared my story about being a teenager and, getting on birth control and actually being able to afford birth control, being so young. And I am so proud that I was able to do that, because it helped me literally plan my family. And I was able to, go around and speak to, congressmen, speak to just whoever about affordable, healthcare, and how, it made an impact in my life. And I was flown to DC to, have a meeting with Tester and Steve Daines, and just to, tell them just how important it was for me to be able to plan my family the way I, wanted to. And I was able to afford that. And I believe, everybody should be able to afford healthcare. And so just my personal experience, like I've, spoken to so many powerful people that, make these decisions, and I am able to put a real person's face to the decisions they're, choosing on. I've also dealt with depression, and now I can share all my experiences. Um, all the stuff that I wished I would have known when I was younger, because maybe it would have had a few less years of being so sad, And so now I get to, help work on programs for suicide prevention, and just try to be that person to say, hey, I still battle with depression, but I'm here, and I'm happy I'm here, and you're sad, but this won't last forever. Just taking my own feelings and what has worked for me and putting it into helping youth, maybe not go through some of the struggles I have, gone through. And I've dealt with addiction, and I get to work on programs that help people, recover from addiction. And the one I'm, working on right now, it's Missoula County Prenatal Substance Use Network. And I'm so happy to be able to, share my experiences of, the fears I had being on drugs, or, having children and the struggles. And now I can take all those fears and experiences and put them into a plan, so maybe it can help somebody else that is, suffering with addiction, that wants to get help but doesn't want to be, penalized for it. So I get to work with doctors and, just say, this is how, a doctor said something to me and it really didn't sit well, because obviously I'm still talking about it to you. Here's how it could have been, rephrased. And just knowing that maybe that doctor could take it away and maybe rephrase something different to the next person, and their recovery can, be that much faster. Like, I'm just so happy that I can help, like, even with my negative experiences, I can turn them into, positive experiences. I had an injury, and the lawyer that, helped me with that actually reached out for my help, and I had become like character witnesses on, trying to get work comp laws changed, so just my experiences, which I'm just a single mom working, just trying to make it through life. Like, who am I? But this makes me feel like my voice matters, and I want all of you to feel the same way, even if it's just something small you're passionate about to something, big that affected your life. Like, you can share your story and make a big impact. And I will stop talking about myself, and I will, I will pass it on to Destiny, so she could share some experiences of her own.
Well, thank you for that, DV. Yeah, it's always good to hear how people can share their stories and make an impact. And bear with me now. This is only my second time trying to present over Zoom. So I'm gonna try and figure out how to share my screen and this PowerPoint. So let's see if this works. There we go. All right. Is that working for people? Looks good.
Perfect.
All right. Oops, this is the end. Let's get to the beginning. Sorry, as I said, second time. Yeah, so today's topic is telling your story through independent journalism. And yeah, that's what we're gonna go over today. This picture I feel like is pretty meaningful for this. This is, oh no, I've forgotten the name. Maybe somebody else remembers the name, but it's the hill at Standing Rock where they set up like a bunch of Wi-Fi uh, receivers and whatnot so that people could broadcast all the news that was happening from there. So people could broadcast from their phones, and like they had digital smoke signals, which was the uh, radio station that came out of there. And yeah, so I just figured this was a pretty impactful picture. So what is independent journalism? This is so there's probably a couple of different ways of looking at this. You might think of something like, well, we used to have the independent newspaper here in Missoula, or you might think of something like Democracy Now! And stuff like that. So that would be sort of like a real nuts and bolts definition. It's not associated with any corporate entity, and it's not controlled by any government. So that would really be like the basic definition. It still includes like facts. It's still journalism. So it's about giving out the facts of what's happening, documentation, and increasing visibility for a certain issue or event. That being said, what we're talking about here today might not be as formal as that. We're talking about people just taking their own story or the stories of their community and broadcasting it so that, yeah, just so that I can increase more visibility. Here we have Myron Dewey and, oh my goodness, I'm gonna forget her name. I'm gonna look this up, doing a good journalism thing to make sure that you have your sources up. And this is, nope, I can't remember. Can, one second, let me, I don't want to say. Okay, yeah, well, this is a good lesson here. If you're doing journalism, you got to get your facts right. You got to be prepared. I thought I had the names written down here correctly, but this is the founder of the Black Lives Matter movement. And these are two great examples of people who are using like independent journalism, also called citizen journalism. Myron Dewey at Standing Rock founded Digital Smoke Signals, which became eventually a more like structured and like well-known independent journalism for like native viewpoint. But at first it was just like him just putting the word out there. And the Black Lives Matter movement, co-founded by several friends, obviously became a huge deal for changing lives and policies across the nation. And that was done through just social media posts to begin with. So why do we need independent journalism? Well, when you see what we consider like the traditional and conventional news sources, they're all large corporations, mostly founded and owned and run by wealthy white people essentially. And so that's the perspective that we often get. There's a lot of inadequate reporting on issues that matter to other groups. And if those issues are reported on, it's often put in a sense of like, oh, that's those people, and we can kind of look in on them, but it's not affecting our experience. So as far as like independent journalism in the way that we're talking about here today, what that gives us is more direct accounts and experiences of what's happening, of like what are the real issues in people's lives, not just the issues that are sort of filtered by these corporations. And there's also fewer hierarchies around what gets put out there based on what is essentially destructive power structures. So that's why we need more people putting out their own story. And I'm going to turn it over to Devi real quick. She's going to tell us about telling your story in multiple contexts.
Um, I want to talk to you about if when you share your story, um, you have to kind of think about, is it going to be shared on with the media? Is it going to be online? Is, it's going to be out in public, and you kind of have to, think, are you okay with that? People knowing this information about you, because it is your story and it's going to be personal. And you just need to know that it could be seen by friends, family members, coworkers, community members, and just keep that in mind, like that, your story is going to, be seen by them, and they might not agree with you, and that's okay. And just, kind of keep in mind like how you will deal with, a question that's brought up, if it is a family member or a coworker, that they don't agree with you. Just, kind of have a prepared, thing that you can say, and or how you can handle that, because this is your story, and sometimes it's kind of hard to share, or it's kind of personal, but you think it needs to be out there, to make a change. And if people don't agree with your story, I kind of take that as a positive in a way, because the point of sharing your story is to get information out. And if this person doesn't agree with it and you're comfortable, you can ask questions on why they feel that way. Because I've found out that sometimes people can be misinformed. And so that could be a good chance to, share your story again, and maybe, clear up some misinformed information they could have had, or show them that this is my life and this is what happened to me, and so maybe they could think about it in a different way. And so just keep that in mind, because that could come up. And also ways you can think of ways you want to handle, if when you're sharing your story, if people are attacking you or asking you bad questions, just trying to throw you off. Make sure you kind of prepare on how you're going to handle that, and you can just say, I choose not to answer that. And sometimes, like, I've had to share my story because I was a national storyteller for Planned Parenthood, and my story was about affordable birth control and how Planned Parenthood helped me plan my family. But people that don't agree with Planned Parenthood would, start calling me, horrible names, and I, wouldn't take offense to it. I would just be like, well, that's your opinion, that's fine, but I know I'm trying to just make a difference, so just keep that in mind, that you will have negative comments, and how you want or how you choose to handle that. And if you are asked a question while you're, telling your story, and you don't know the answer to it, don't make up an answer, because like that's not going to help any situation. You're here to tell your story and your truth. And if you don't know, the answer, just say, I don't know. Or if you don't want to answer a question, you just say, I don't want to answer that, because this is your story. You are the one telling it, so you have to feel comfortable, with sharing this, and just realize there's going to be people that don't agree with you, so they will try to, throw you off, and just keep that in mind, so you have a way to handle it, as it comes up, if it happens too. Now I will pass it on to Destiny for some community engagements.
Hey, Devi. Thanks for that. I'm actually going to go back a little bit here. And talk about first how and where to publish, and this will actually come back around to community engagement. So before I get started here, I just want to invite people to start thinking about any ideas of issues that you would like to get out there, the sort of events or stories that are happening in your life or in your community that you would like to publish yourself. And so we're just going to talk about how to document and where to publish things. So you can start by looking at what you have available. We have a lot of tools. Of course, not everybody has the same tools, but we have a lot of stuff available to us in general these days. So a big thing is a phone camera. If you have a phone that has a camera on it, whether takes video or just photos, that is a huge resource in documenting. Probably one of the biggest reasons that independent journalism has taken off so much in the past decade. But even if you can't use your phone for whatever reason, camera's broke or you just don't have one, you have the ability to type or to somehow, well, you might have the ability to type or somehow get your thoughts out in written word or spoken word. So if you, for example, can type out a blog post or even just a social media post, or just get your thoughts out there in some way. If you can record yourself, that's great. You also have possibly a community around you, like the people in your town or your region or the people in your family, your friend group, even. You have people around you that you might be able to network with and just get support, or you might have shared ideas from each other. You also have the biggest resource of all, and the reason that independent journalism is so important, which is your own personal experience and insights. Like, that is what's important, whether you're giving your personal experience or your community experience, those are what you're bringing to the table. So next, after you know what tools you have available, you can start thinking about planning. Some of the basics of that are just to make sure that you have a clear idea of the point you're trying to make. Like if you're trying to get visibility around a certain issue, like what are you trying to say about that issue? Are you for or against something? Do you think that something isn't being brought to the conversation that should be mentioned? And be able to give a short synopsis of why something is important. So yeah, you don't want to go off on like a lot, even though there's might be a lot to say around something that's really important to you. You want to be able to summarize it, just so that you know what your point is and you know exactly why you're here. As far as planning, you can also decide like, well, where are you going to go to document what's happening? Is it just something that's happening within your own life, within your own house? Can you just document from your room? Do you need to go out to events? Is there a rally or a movie or something that's happening? Is there a place you need to go? So just figure out where those things are happening and how you can be involved and be there at the right place and time. One of the most important things about journalism, and this does apply to independent journalism, even as much as it does to more conventional news sources, make sure to have credibility, like maintain your credibility, get your facts correct. And yes, that was Patrice Coulor in the picture before. Thank you to Danny for saying that. And I also just looked it up again on my phone. Make sure you have your facts correct. Make sure you know what you're saying, do your research, have it down. And again, DV also mentioned this before, but I'm just gonna say it again, just so that people know. Like, don't be afraid to say you don't know something. If you hear a rumor that sounds like it might be interesting to report, it might sound like something important. Um, you can just say you don't know. Say, oh, there's this rumor. Like if you're in the middle of reporting and you find something out, don't just say it as fact. And don't put out guesses or whatever. Like keep your credibility intact. That way you'll keep credibility around the issue. Like people won't question like the issue if you are getting your facts together and you know what you're talking about. And if you don't know what you're talking about, you're not pretending that you do. That is even more important. As far as like visibility and publishing, there's a lot of places where you can publish as an independent person. One of the easiest that you hear about is obviously social media. You can just put up a post on your Facebook. If you have Facebook, you can also, and a phone, you could do Facebook Live. That was something that was incredibly important during Standing Rock, for example. Just people posting their live videos from what was happening. You can also use blog sites. There are blog sites such as WordPress. Yes, WordPress, and oh my gosh, I'm gonna think of some others. Before the end of this, I will put those in the Slack. But yeah, you can just put it up on a blog. You might think that blogs are kind of a thing of the past. They're not actually. There's still a lot of people who read blogs. So that is something you could do. And you could also link it to your social media to get more people seeing it. There's also YouTube. It doesn't cost anything to upload your videos, upload what you're doing. Even if you're not recording something, you could just type. There's like text you can put, make a YouTube video that's just text. TikTok is one of my favorites. I know that it kind of gets a lot of flack, but it is like just one of the best ways, in my opinion, well, most effective, I guess I won't say best, but one of the most effective ways to get out information like quickly, and it's engaging and people are watching it. So yeah, it's effective. Know your audience. So, don't just try to make your posts or whatever you're doing, don't try to make it too general. Know who you're talking to. Are you talking to your community, kind of an inside look at what's going on? Or are you talking to somebody outside the community, maybe somebody who has power to change things and you want them to see? Like, know who you're talking to, and kind of tailor around that. Also, I say shoot for the stars. If you are writing a story that you think more people should see, uh, go ahead and submit it to newspapers. Go ahead and like submit it to something like the AP or Reuters. You might not make it, people might not want to publish your story, but you might also be surprised. I'd say especially like local newspapers would be an easy place to start with that. You might be surprised at how much traction you can get. And if you don't, then that's okay. Like we said, corporate conventional journalism is not everything. And so we don't need to go there if it's not happening. And yeah, so I'm going to go on to something that might be like in just a natural effect of doing this type of journalism, and that is community engagement. I just wanted to mention this. It's not necessarily the journalism itself, but it kind of goes hand in hand with this independent community, like personal journalism. And so often when you report on something like this, especially if not a lot of other people are reporting on the same issue, you'll get a community around you because that's where the visibility is. and people will see that you're talking about this and they'll want to work with you on this issue. And that can be a great thing. If that's how you want to go, you can use this momentum to organize events, to build up momentum for like policy issues. There's a lot that can be done with this. I'm just saying, not necessarily that this has to be your goal, but it might just be a good, like a good side effect. And if you're not um, up to engaging uh, thoroughly, like maybe you just don't have the capacity for it, maybe you physically or mentally don't have the capacity for extra engagement like this, just let it be known and just continue doing your documenting, maybe refer people to someone else in the community. But yeah, so that being said, I feel like this can be a really great way to like build momentum around a policy issue and get it changed. So yeah, I'm gonna send it back to Devi and she's just gonna go over a few tips on storytelling. And I'm just gonna check the time real quick. Okay, yeah, so I think we might just go through these tips real quick so we have time to hear from people if that's okay.
Okay, these are some tips that I've learned throughout the past 3 years, sharing my story. If you're speaking to a crowd, don't speak too fast. Give people time to process what you're saying. If you say a number, like how old you were, usually give about 2 seconds before you start talking again, just because it gives people time to process what you had just said. And instead of like going on and, not really getting through what you want to, get out to people. So don't speak too fast if you're speaking to a crowd. And I have the hardest time with that because I just have so much that I want to say and I want to get it all out as fast as I can so I don't take up too much of your time. But I know that's not the right way and I'm like working on that. But that is a really big one that I've learned is just, speak slower. And especially if you're speaking to a crowd. Another one is having tissue in your pocket. I know it sounds like tissue in your pocket, but truly like tissue. If you're outside speaking to people, like what if your nose starts running? You don't want to be wiping on your sleeve in front of people. Or another example is about a month ago, I was in a meeting and it was a meeting about my mom and I'm trying to change some unemployment issues that she had dealt with before she passed away. And so I thought, I was going to be strong and, get through this appointment. And I totally was. But there was a moment where, my eyes started tearing up while I was talking about my mom. And I was so thankful that I had like a tissue in my pocket so I could just like wipe my tear. And, if that does happen, just, compose yourself, and, keep talking. And, it's okay if you do, get a tear because this is your story, it's personal, even if it's sad or, not sad, just know that if it is a touchy subject, when you do share it, it could open that wound back up. And so just be prepared for that if it does happen, if you are sharing, a sensitive, subject. And take care of yourself, like make sure you're emotionally ready to share this story. Even if you want change, like right now, just make sure you're, like mentally prepared to share this story because it can be really hard talking about personal things to strangers. And, they're private things that, a lot of times that I was like ashamed of like my drug use. Like there was things that I never wanted anybody to know about. And now I tell the world because I'm no longer ashamed because I get to, help people with, situations like so just know that sharing personal things could, reopen a wound. Just be prepared for, if that does come up. And if you are, speaking to people and you start fumbling your words or you mess up, like don't beat yourself up over that because you're not a professional speaker. I feel fortunate that I can, do this for a living, like share my experiences, but yeah, I still get so nervous and I still mispronounce words that I know how to pronounce, but it just sometimes I do mess up when I'm talking to people and I just take a breath and, compose myself and just keep on going and getting through it. And if those situations do, come up, try to be prepared afterwards, like how you're going to decompress because, if you do, fumble and you are, upset with yourself, like just remember, like you don't have to be upset with yourself and just, reassure yourself and, have a plan for afterwards, like how you're going to, you know, just de-stress after speaking to people because it is very, very stressful. And another thing is
These
thinking
are,
about audience.
oh, sorry, DB. These are great points. I'm so sorry. I wanted to hear them in more detail, but we are running out of time. Is there a way we can just go through a little more quickly? And I know I asked for them to go slower. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Your topic that you're asking people about, just make sure it's aware. Like normally I like to, bring it up like I want to talk to you about this. And then towards the end, just, wrap it around and be like, this is why I'm talking to you about affordable healthcare or whatever it is you're passionate about and telling people about. Is your topic or ask clear in your story. Um, if you're planning on asking a question directly to a person, uh, when you're sharing your story, make sure you have a backup question because I was speaking with Kathleen Williams and Steve Daines and I had my question, but they already answered that before I spoke. I didn't have a backup question and I had to scramble to get one. So just, try to be prepared with backup stuff. And yeah, just try to ground yourself before you speak, just to get in that mood and just know that you're here to make a difference and don't beat yourself up if it doesn't go well, and have fun sharing your stories and your experiences. I will pass it on to Destiny.
Sorry about that, DB. What nobody knows here is that while we were practicing this all week, I was like, let's go slower through this. So now I'm like, let's go faster, and it's just the opposite. So sorry. But yeah, I did want to leave some time to hear from people about the kind of issues that they think that they think they might want to share. Oh, sorry. Before we do that, yes, I was going to skip this, but I do think it's kind of important just to go over this real quick. Just when you're thinking about doing this kind of journalism, this kind of outreach and making things visible, you want to think about whether you're doing this in a moral way. So being ethical is just making sure that things are professional, that you're not like breaking any laws or any just not doing anything sort of like questionable that might that might cause harm to people. So we don't want to cause any extra harm that's not necessary, especially if that is to people who are not in power. And so some things you want to think about, and especially since this is journalism and it's more about like documenting things, it's not that you can't tell somebody else's story, but if that's where you're coming from, you really need to kind of think about what your motivation is, with your when you're telling your story versus telling somebody else's story. Like, do you have a connection to what's happening? Do you have a connection to the outcome of the situation? Maybe it's not your personal story, but you're connected to the story through your community or something like that. If you don't have those connections, again, it's not that you uh, can't tell that story. I'm trying to think of an example where you would be able to, and I can't. It would be, yeah. It's just you might want to stop and think about if there's something that you're more connected to, and that you have um, more personal insight about, and personal reasons to talk about. Uh, Also, if you're at something like a protest, where people are getting arrested or something like that, you probably want to avoid identifying people's names and faces. Just, if you can get to an angle where people are not visible, maybe stand further back. Or if you can't do that, if you're in a big group and you're kind of documenting some sort of action, uh, you can ask people, just ask them, or, well, yeah, just say, hey, I'm doing video here, or I'm taking a photo. Like, anybody who doesn't want to be filmed, raise your hand, or stand off to this area where you're not in the frame. So yeah, just let people know what's happening, and give them a choice of whether or not you are documenting them. Another thing is revealing other people's personal information. I guess the biggest one I can think of here is, like, you don't want to reveal, for example, somebody's like gender or sexual identity if they're like not if they're not in a place where they're revealing that to other people. Yeah, you just don't want to like reveal a lot of personal information about people without their consent. Um, so yeah, just stop and slow down, check in with yourself about your motivations, and whether you're approaching the documentation in a way that is respectful, um, for the people that you want to respect. And yeah, with that, the let's hear from the attendees. Does anybody have questions or ideas that they want to share? I think I saw a few people further up talking about something they wanted to write on. You can go ahead and unmute yourself. I'm also going to stop sharing for a second. Would Jennifer or Rebecca, would you like to speak a little bit on your ideas?
Sure. Hi, Will. So Rebecca Johnson, I live in Montana City, just outside of Helena, and I am a big a volunteer organizer for voter registration, as well as voting rights rallies around the Helena area. And I think that personal stories are definitely the most powerful and the most effective way to get people to notice an issue. And that's why I'm always looking for people that have found difficulties voting in Montana would be an extremely powerful story to tell, because with more and more restrictive voting laws, we need to get their stories out. People need to see the seriousness of who's being turned away. They don't realize that it's just, your next door neighbor who cannot vote in this election. It's, people who are just, like you, that are being denied the right to vote. And that's just my point, and my problem is it doesn't impact me. I'm a very big advocate in myself voting, my family votes. So I don't have that personal story. And I need people, to find them and get their stories out there. And so I feel like there needs to be more of a core of people who would be willing to, gather those stories and then publicize them, because we have a writers group in Helena and we are very prolific and we get in the local papers a lot. And so the whole key is, though, it's not my personal story. I have to find people that will let me share their stories. So any ideas on that would be helpful. Thanks.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. Thank you. I was having trouble thinking of an example where it wasn't your story, but it was important to tell. I think this is a really good one because it is something that impacts a lot of people. It's not necessarily, I guess it's like voting. That's something that generally affects everybody, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I do think that, yeah, I'm glad you're considering the fact that it's not your story. And so you want to get other people to tell their story. And in that case, I think the documenting part of it and the journalism part of it would probably be to facilitate other people telling their stories. You could provide, well, first of all, make sure that people want to tell their story. I'm sure on this issue, there are people out there who want to tell it, but if you come across something like this, just make sure there are people that want to tell their story, like they're actively vocal, and then just ask what you can do to help. Perhaps it's inviting some of them to come and join your writers group and pushing to get their story or their letter in the newspaper. Yeah, Devi, were you going to add something?
Yes, I loved that question because, the reason we tell our stories is for like structural change, self-liberation, to advocate policies that matter to you, for personal healing, to inspire others. And so since you're passionate about this, you don't even need to like interview people. You can go and say, I see that there is a problem with voter rights. I am aware, like, frame it like that. Like, I see situations, or, put it your personal story as how it makes you feel knowing about this and experiencing, seeing these people that can't vote. How is that, you can make that into your story. Like, I feel this is not the right thing because, they can't vote. Make it how you feel. And so you can, make stories on what you see, like how, for example, like my mom was sick and so I'm fighting for her. And so it's not my story, but I am phrasing it as when I took care of my mom, or when I saw my mom, or I got to witness this, and so it's her story, but it's through my eyes. And that could be a way you could structure your voting rights to get people aware that this issue is out there.
Thanks. Yeah, my problem is I'm a very fact-oriented person, so I put a lot of info about how many people are impacted by the new restrictive law. But then I do try to say it'll be, a senior at a senior center on election day because they didn't update their voter registration. They're not voting anymore. So I do try to, get some personal stories in that way of who I think will be impacted. But I think it's even more powerful when you find an individual that has been turned away from the polling place because of a new restrictive law.
Yeah, and that also,
thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that also gives them time to, sorry, just looking at the time. That also gives them the power to talk about themselves. Like, yeah, maybe you want to come in with the facts and stuff, but like leave the personal experience part of it to the people with that experience. I think that's a good approach. Winsong, do you have a comment?
Yes, I would. Yeah, I have a comment. I have become personally aware of an invisible voting rights problem. And that is that the last few times I've gone to vote, it occurred to me to ask them, how would we know if our vote has actually been counted? And then they told me something which I've never heard or read about anywhere. And that is that they said they go and, oh, sorry, my ear things are going to die soon. Hopefully you can hear me. They said that they go and they compare our signature to the signature that when we signed up. And that immediately was a red flag for me, because I'm one of those people, my signature has changed my entire life. It's never the same. And so I got them to actually check for me, does my signature, is it anywhere near the one that I signed up with? So I'm just thinking that if people are thinking about educating people through media or otherwise, that maybe this is the topic to bring to people's awareness, that we may think that we voted and we may actually have no voice because of something such as a signature change, which is invisible, and they would never tell us that we were not counted for that reason.
That's a good
I was
point.
gonna
Have you
tell
shared
you-
that anywhere?
But yeah, there is on my voter page. You actually can check that your ballot, but it's for federal elections only for now. I believe they were trying to get that changed. They might be working on it actually, but you can go and check that your ballot was accepted. And but usually county elections offices, they notify you if there's enough time that they had an issue with your signature. And that depends on each county elections office. And I know, Lewis and Clark County, they have a great office, very responsive, and they will notify people there was an issue with your signature. You need to come in and verify it, and then your ballot will be accepted. So, but yeah.
Yeah, even though your
Oh.
signature changes, they keep
Yeah.
a file of all of them. And so if it doesn't look exactly as it did when, 20 years ago, if, they just have it all in a row so they could just kind of look. And if it
And
looks way off,
Yeah,
then
and if you notice, Hannah just put in the voter info page link. That's where you can check. And that, yeah,
Yeah.
the
And as
bullying
Ella
issue in
said,
our country or our state.
And as Alice said, you can volunteer with us as well if you want to check on this. But as far as like reporting this, I think like Winsong, that sounds like you have a really great story. Honestly, just as somebody who might be affected by that. Have you made a video or posted anything about that? Just real quick in the next 30 seconds or so.
I haven't said anything, and I also voted at the last minute on that time, at the voting day, so they would not have had time to count my ballot in the future because I was unaware that that was an issue.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are, and that seems like a really great thing to report on. These are some great ideas. I'm glad we ended up with, a really good topic in general. I think there's probably other topics out there that are also not getting a lot of visibility. I'm sure there's some great ideas. If you want to continue the conversation in the chat, we will have the Slack channel open. I'm gonna wrap up now. We're just a tiny bit over, but I would like to thank Devi for her help in this, and also all of you for joining us. Join us in the Slack if you still have more to say. You can email me at destiny@montanawomenvote.org if you have any questions. That's Destiny, DESTINI. And I'll get back to you as soon as I can. We also have an evaluation form that I think will be in the chat soon, right there. And if you fill that out, you can enter your name and you'll get a chance to win in a raffle, either a gift card or a signed copy of What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat by our keynote speaker, Aubrey Gordon. And if you want to go back and review this, we'll have a full recording up on our website as soon as possible. And yeah, so just wanted to say thank you all for joining. And I hope you can take this with you and spread the word on whatever issues are important to you.
yes, thank you.